2 Canadian soldiers. 1 mission. Go into the occupied city, don't get caught, count the Germans, find the resistance, come back. One of them gets killed. The other one, a scout with 1 working eye and a submachine gun, does not come back. Not right away. Because instead of retreating to the line, instead of waiting for the morning artillery barrage that's been scheduled to do the job, he looks at the city in front of him and makes a decision that is not in any military manual. He's going to liberate it, alone, tonight. Not because he was ordered to, not because backup was on the way, because he looked at the situation and concluded that he could handle it himself, and that 50,000 Dutch civilians inside that city did not need to be in the path of an artillery strike if there was another option. By sunrise, the German garrison had pulled out. The city of Zwolle was free. No artillery fired. No buildings destroyed. 50,000 people alive. 1 man. 1 night. No orders, no backup, no plan except the one he made up in the dark. This is not legend. This is not a movie. Every detail in this video is pulled from documented military records, Veterans Affairs Canada, the Juno Beach Centre, Dutch resistance accounts and post-war historical investigation. The name of the man is Leo Major. The date is April 13th to 14, 1945. The city is still standing. Here's how it happened. You don't understand what happened in Zwolle without understanding who Leo Major was before he got there. Born January 23, 1921, in New Bedford, Massachusetts, French-Canadian parents, family moved back to Quebec when he was still an infant. By 14, he'd moved out of his father's house. By 19, he enlisted in the Canadian Army. He joined le Régiment de la Chaudière and trained as a scout and sniper, the people sent out first alone into territory nobody else goes into yet. He landed at Juno Beach on D-Day, June 6, 1944. On that same day, hours into his first combat, he helped capture a German half-track. Inside, it was military communications equipment and German code books. His commanders sent them up the chain. Major went back to work. Then, on June 24, 1944, during a reconnaissance mission near Carpiquet, his patrol encountered a group of German soldiers. In the firefight, a wounded German soldier threw a phosphorus grenade. Phosphorus doesn't just explode. It burns on contact with oxygen, meaning it keeps burning as long as it has anything to burn. The grenade exploded near Major, burning his face. When it was over, he had lost approximately 80% of the vision in his left eye. The medical assessment was straightforward. He should be evacuated to England. Major refused. His argument, as recorded in multiple sources, as a sniper, he only needed 1 good eye to sight his weapon. He was staying. He reportedly told medics he looked like a pirate and kept moving. He was given an eye patch, he kept fighting. The men in his unit called him the one-eyed ghost. Hold that image for a second, because that is the person who, 10 months later, is going to walk into an occupied city at night and decide to take it apart from the inside. But before Zwolle, there's one more thing you need to know about what Leo Major was capable of. And it's the detail that, once you hear it, makes the rest of this story make a different kind of sense. Fall 1944. Battle of the Scheldt, the brutal Allied campaign to open the port of Antwerp. Canadian forces pushing through the Netherlands, taking ground house by house. Major is sent out to find a missing patrol of recruits. He doesn't find them. What he finds instead is a German garrison. The specific details of what followed are the kind of thing that sounds invented until you look at the records. Major, alone, convinces the German commander that the position is surrounded by a much larger Canadian force. He creates the impression of a full assault, movement, positioning, the specific kind of pressure that works in darkness when nobody can count how many people are actually out there. The garrison surrenders. He marches 93 German prisoners back to the Canadian line. By himself. Let that number sit there. 93 men disarmed and marched to captivity by one person with an eye patch. This account is widely cited, including in Veterans Affairs Canada biographical materials, and is primarily drawn from Major's own recollections, consistent with the pattern of his documented service. The number 93 is the figure that appears across multiple biographical sources. When his commanding officers processed what he'd done, they had two options: flag the man as a liability, or keep assigning him reconnaissance missions and see what he came back with. They chose option 2. By the time April 1945 rolls around, Leo Major has been doing this for almost a year. His commanding officers know what he is. His fellow soldiers know what he is. The Germans are about to find out, before the guns and the night and the one man, the context. Because without it, you don't feel the full weight of what Major walked into. The Netherlands had been under German occupation since May 1940, 5 years. By the winter of 1944-1945, the situation had collapsed into something that historians would later call the Hunger Winter, the Hunger Winter. The Germans had blocked food shipments to the Western Netherlands in retaliation for a Dutch railway strike that the Allies had encouraged specifically to disrupt German logistics. The result? Famine. Historians estimate more than 20,000 Dutch civilians died of starvation and related causes between the fall of 1944 and the liberation in 1945. Zwolle, in the northern Netherlands, was still under occupation in April 1945. The city had roughly 50,000 civilians. The Allied advance was moving through the region. The city was going to have to be taken. Allied command's standard method for taking a defended city: artillery. Shell the German positions, suppress the garrison. Move in after. It worked. It also meant that whatever was in the way of that process, buildings, streets, people, was in the way of that process. The reconnaissance mission given to Leo Major and Corporal Willy Arsenault on April 13, 1945, was a last window task. Slip into Zwolle before the barrage. Make contact with the Dutch resistance inside the city. Assess how many Germans are actually there. Radio back. That's the mission. Get information. Come home. Not walk into the city and empty it of Germans by yourself. That part was Leo Major's own idea. April 13, 1945. Major and Arsenault cross into the outskirts of Zwolle after dark. Willy Arsenault, born December 26, 1918, in Grande Bay, Quebec, 26 years old. Corporal le Régiment de la Chaudière. He and Major had served together through the campaigns in France and the Netherlands. The accounts from men who knew both of them use the same word consistently: brothers, not literally. In the way combat creates, they move through the darkness. They are conducting reconnaissance, i.e. quiet, disciplined, doing exactly what they came to do. Then, German forces find them. In the firefight that follows, Willy Arsenault is killed. He is buried at the Holten Canadian War Cemetery in the Netherlands, where he has been since April 14, 1945. Major is now alone inside the perimeter of an occupied city, with a dead friend, and a mission that just became impossible to complete as originally designed. The textbook response: withdraw, report the contact, report the casualty, let command decide the next step. Major doesn't withdraw. What happens next, and the historical record is consistent on this, is that Leo Major makes a decision that by any conventional military logic should not have been made by a single person, in the dark, in a city he doesn't fully know, against a garrison of unknown size. He decides that the city is going to be free by morning, and then he gets to work. If you want to understand what Leo Major actually did on the night of April 13th to 14, 1945, you have to understand something about how cities work in the dark. In an occupied city at night, sound travels, fire travels, chaos travels. A single man moving through different positions, firing from different directions, creating noise and light and unpredictable pressure from multiple angles simultaneously, in conditions of poor visibility and high stress that is functionally indistinguishable from a coordinated assault by a much larger force. This is not a theory. This is what Major understood from nearly a year of operating as a scout, from 93 prisoners, from the experience of one man creating the impression of many. He had already done this. He knew exactly how it worked. He moved through the city. He fired at German positions and then moved before they could fix his location. He threw grenades. He shouted. He created the acoustic and tactical signature of an assault force from inside the city's perimeter, cutting off retreat, forcing the Germans into a calculation about where the main attack was coming from. He made contact with the Dutch resistance, whose members were inside Zwolle and had been waiting for exactly this moment. They could not fight the way Major could fight, but they could communicate. They could spread information. They could amplify the psychological pressure on a garrison that was already uncertain. The Gestapo headquarters in Zwolle was set on fire that night. Historians note carefully here, accounts differ on the exact details of how this happened, who was directly involved, what the sequence was. What the record confirms, the Gestapo headquarters burned the night of April 13, 14, during the time Leo Major was moving through the city. At some point, Major encountered a German officer. Accounts identify this as a senior figure in the garrison, and told him what he needed to hear. The city was surrounded. Canadian forces were moving in from multiple directions. The garrison had a choice: fight the morning and lose badly or leave now. The German garrison chose to leave. By the time the sun came up on April 14, 1945, the city of Zwolle was free. The Canadian soldiers who arrived at dawn didn't find a fight. They found a city that had already been liberated. No artillery fired. 50,000 civilians, alive. One man. If you've been watching Warblind for a while, hit the like button right now. Because this is the kind of story we exist to tell, and the algorithm decides whether stories like this reach more people. One tap. That's it. This is the question that every serious military historian asks when they first encounter the Zwolle record. Because it sounds like something that gets invented about soldiers after the fact, the kind of legend that grows in the telling until it no longer resembles what actually happened. So let's be direct about what the record shows and what actually explains it. The German garrison in Zwolle in April 1945 was not an elite fighting force. By that point in the war, German units in occupied Netherlands were a mixture of experienced soldiers, older conscripts, and men who understood, clearly at this stage, that Germany had lost. The context is not a garrison eager to die for a war that was already over. It is a garrison looking for an exit. Major gave them one. The second piece, Major did not work entirely alone. The Dutch resistance members inside Zwolle were active participants that night, providing local knowledge, spreading information through the civilian network, and functioning as an internal amplifier for the pressure Major was creating from outside. He was the weapon. They were part of the delivery system. The third piece, and this is the part that's hardest to explain without having spent a year watching Leo Major operate. By April 1945, he had built a very specific set of skills through very specific experience. 93 prisoners, months of solo reconnaissance in hostile territory, the eye injury, the refusal to leave, the continued operation under conditions that had already disqualified most soldiers from service. He wasn't improvising in Zwolle. He was doing something he had in different form done before. None of this makes what happened ordinary. It was extraordinary. What the record refuses to do is allow the story to remain unexplained. Because the explanation exists, it's grounded in documented fact, and it's more interesting than the myth. Germany surrendered on May 8, 1945. Major was awarded the Distinguished Conduct Medal, one of the highest decorations available to non-commissioned officers across the British Commonwealth. The citation covers his actions in Zwolle. It is a document that exists, that is accessible, that describes what he did in the language that military commendations use: measured, factual, precise. Most of the men who came home in 1945 stayed home. Major did not. When the Korean War began in 1950 and Canada committed forces to the United Nations effort, Major went. He joined the 2nd Battalion, Royal 20 Suisse Regiment, the Vanduus, as part of the scout and sniper platoon. He was 30 years old, missing an eye, and had already done more in combat than most soldiers see in a full career. In 1951, near Hill 355, a position designated Little Gibraltar for its tactical value in the Korean landscape, the Vanduus were engaged in sustained fighting against Chinese forces. The details of Major's specific actions here are documented in his second decoration citation: holding positions under severe pressure, refusing withdrawal despite orders to fall back, directing fire and maintaining ground that, by the operational math, should not have been held. He received a bar to his Distinguished Conduct Medal. That means a second Distinguished Conduct Medal, for a completely different war. He is the only Canadian soldier in history to accomplish this. He is one of only 3 soldiers in the entire British Commonwealth, across all wars, all conflicts, all campaigns, to receive the Distinguished Conduct Medal twice in 2 separate wars. The man who refused to evacuate from France with one eye also refused to leave Korea. He came back from both. Here's the part of the Leo Major story that most military history coverage doesn't spend much time on, and it's worth slowing down for. After the war, Major went back to Quebec. He didn't talk about Zwolle. His family, his children, the people around him in civilian life, knew almost nothing specific about what he had done. By most accounts, the silence was genuine, not strategic. He had done what needed doing. It was done. He didn't need to say more. In Zwolle it was different. The Dutch civilians who had lived through the hunger winter, who had been trapped under 5 years of occupation, who had watched the Gestapo headquarters burn and the German garrison leave and the sun come up on a free city on April 14, 1945, they passed that story down. It became the kind of local history that lives in family conversations, that children grow up knowing, that defines how a place understands its own survival. The Dutch began reaching out. They found Major. They made him an honorary citizen of Zwolle. They named a street after him. They built a statue. They established annual commemorative ceremonies, events that continue today, connecting the current people of the city to the night in 1945, when one man with a submachine gun and an eye patch walked through their streets and changed what was going to happen. When Major visited Zwolle in his later years, the reception was not the formal acknowledgement of historical significance. It was personal. It was a city telling a man, "We are here because of what you did. Our children exist because of what you did." Leo Major died on October 12, 2008. He was 87 years old. He is buried at the Last Post Fund National Field of Honor in Pointe-Claire, Quebec. In Zwolle on April 14th every year they remember. Drop a comment below. Did you know about Leo Major before this video? Because we've shown this story to people and the reaction is always the same. They don't believe it until we walk them through the sources. Tell us below, pull back from the night and the city and the one man. And there's something broader that the Leo Major record forces into view. The conventional history of the Second World War is built around mass. Armies in the millions. Industrial output measured in thousands of tanks and aircraft and ships, the movements of entire fronts, entire theaters. That framing is accurate. At the macro level, the war was won by the Allies outproducing and outmanning the Axis, and nothing about what Leo Major did changes that. What it does change is the assumption that individual action in a war of that scale is necessarily marginal. That one person, in one night, in one city, can't really matter to anything larger than that one city. Zwolle is a specific counterexample. 50,000 civilians, 0 artillery. A city intact. Those are measurable outcomes that exist because of decisions made by one person in the dark who was supposed to be on a reconnaissance mission. His story doesn't fit the template of inspirational simplicity that military biography often reaches for. He wasn't fighting for an ideal in any abstract sense. He wasn't making a calculated sacrifice. He looked at a specific situation, drew on a specific set of skills built through years of documented experience, and executed a solution that the official plan had not anticipated. That's a different kind of lesson than the one most war stories are designed to deliver. It's more specific, and because it's more specific, it's more real. The record exists. The sources are accessible. The Dutch built a statue. The Canadian government awarded the medal, twice. The story is true, and that is, on its own, enough. On the morning of April 14, 1945, Leo Major walked out of Zwolle. Behind him, a city with 50,000 people, a liberated Dutch resistance, and a German garrison that had decided, correctly, that staying wasn't an option. Ahead of him, the Canadian line where his commanding officers would have to process the fact that the city they were about to shell was already free. Willie Arsenault was still in the city. He would be until the Holten Canadian War Cemetery was ready to receive him. Major received the DCM. He went to Korea. He received it again. He went back to Quebec. He didn't talk about it much. And decades later, in a city in the northern Netherlands, people who were born long after 1945 gather every April to remember a night that their grandparents described. A city going dark, then fire, then shouting in the streets, then silence, then mourning, then free. One man got the job done. Not because no one else could have, but because no one else was there and he didn't wait. That's the Warblind standard. Documented. Real. The record that the textbooks don't have room for. The next video in this series covers a soldier who did something in the same war that is, if anything, harder to verify, and yet the documentation exists. If Major felt impossible, wait until you see what's next. Don't miss it. Subscribe if you haven't. We'll see you there.